What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe. Let's get into Pete Carmichael.
What a transition.
Pete Carmichael out as Saints offensive coordinator. And I think it's a very interesting picture to kind of pick apart. Someone had to pay the price, right? And this is kind of complicated to me because when you talk about Pete Carmichael, like, ask yourself right now, how do I feel about Pete Carmichael? And a lot of people are probably experiencing similar things to how they felt when Matt House was out, like joy, like, yeah, he sucked, whatever. And I just think that that's kind of, man, if that's how you feel, that sucks for Pete Carmichael because it's not what he deserves out of your feelings. This is a cat who's been the Saints OC for the last 18 years and did some pretty good things. I mean, even this year you finished being as bad as you were, 9th in points per game, 14th in yards per game. So, a disaster maybe philosophically, not a disaster purely statistically. But for 18 years, I remember he was the play caller in that record-breaking 2011 offense. Sean Payton breaks his leg in week 6. Pete Carmichael takes over. They set NFL records. And you can say, oh, it was all Drew Brees. Well, look at who's the quarterback coach for the Jets? That Aaron Rodgers?
Hackett.
Yes.
Daniel Hackett.
Okay, obviously, Hackett was not what you thought he was without Aaron Rodgers, but him and Aaron Rodgers together are quite the combination. Like, sometimes a coach and a player have to bring out the best in each other. And even if the player is doing the majority of the heavy lifting, the coach is not just irrelevant to the success. And so I guess all of this is to say, just take a second today and appreciate that Pete Carmichael gave 18 years of his life to your New Orleans Saints, working as hard as he could to try to be as good as he could. And for a lot of those 18 years, it was the golden era. And now you get to this year, and I understand it. I said it's complicated, right? Because Pete Carmichael's probably, deserving of this fate, given the stagnation of the last 3 years. But also, Pete Carmichael's a bit of a scapegoat. And even if you look at this season alone, Pete Carmichael was terrible at the beginning, but he showed as much improvement as anyone in the league in terms of finally realizing, okay, look, I've just got to change. I mean, from running the least amount of play action in the entire NFL to, I think, doubling or tripling that number over the final few weeks. Pre-snap motion, all of a sudden back in the fold. Again, inexcusable that it wasn't there to begin with, but you always want to credit somebody for adjusting and making the changes to find success, which he did. However, in the end, the success was just too little too late. The situation's too complicated in terms of frustration, missing playoffs, and somebody's head needing to roll. Someone had to go, and it just unfortunately kind of makes sense that it was Pete Carmichael. So, again, I think probably the correct move that's been made. I'm interested to see who's next. But let's also not just completely debase the name of Pete Carmichael and ignore what was nearly 2 decades of good.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and that is so long to be a coach in one spot.
Yes.
At any level, high school, college, pros, to be in one spot and for the large majority of it to do a good job and to work with one of the best quarterbacks that we've ever seen play. And also remember, he was with Drew in San Diego as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right before. And so I don't know what his involvement was with kind of being like, hey, we need to sign this guy. Because Drew had some ups and downs in San Diego. That's why they drafted Phillip Rivers. But I'm sure that he played into that as well, and he comes over with Drew in 2006. And so there's a lot of great things that Pete Carmichael did for the New Orleans Saints. But sometimes, things just have to change.
Yes.
And he was the only coach that was left over that had been there the entire time under Sean Payton. Like Dennis Allen had and Marone had, but they had obviously gone other places, done other things. Pete was there the entire time. And that can be good, but also there can be a need for change. And you feel like you're at that point right now. And he did decide to change around week 14. I think it's about when he decided to maybe change some things up.
I think it might have been not that it matters. I think that like basically their strong 6-game finish is when you started to see it. But to your point, it started to get even more and more at week 14, and the offense started to click more.
It felt like it wasn't just empty calories.
Yeah.
About week 14.
Yes.
And maybe next year they could run it back, and maybe you could build off that. But if you're not going to make a change at head coach, which this shows you they're absolutely not going to, then like T-Bob said, like somebody had to kind of fall on the sword. Somebody had to be the reason why next year is going to be different than this year was. Because you don't have that to lean back on with Dennis Allen. You can't lean back on his time with the Raiders as a head coach. You'd be like, well, he struggled this year, went 500, this season in the Raiders, and the next year they were 4 games over. You don't have that.
No.
It's not in the resume. And so somebody was going to have to be out, and it's Pete Carmichael. And look, if Pete wants a job in Denver, he probably already has it. So he'll find work. Like Pete Carmichael will be an NFL coach if he wants to be an NFL
he
coach
could probably
next
retire, right? I mean, if he
Oh, he
wants,
could.
he's 58. Like I don't know, it's up to him. But yeah,
he's a very young looking 58.
He is. He looks great.
He's very young looking. But he was in the NFL for over 20, almost 25 years, right?
That's what I'm
straight.
saying.
He went from Louisiana Tech, where he was the quarterback coach when Tim Rattay was there, and I think one of them I think Luke McCown was there too. And then he goes right to the NFL, and he's been there ever since. And so he could, but if he wants a job in Denver, it's waiting on him.
I mean, he was the play caller of an offense that averaged 476 yards a game, still the NFL record. Again, so let's not lose sight. Now, like, I think it's fair to say the game passed him by.
Yeah.
When you look at guys like Shanahan and McDaniel and McVay and the young guns and the concepts that they were employing and all of the easy button plays right, be it, using a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of play action, which, again, are things that sound very base but are even being taken to the new levels by this new generation of play callers. And yeah, he had lost that, and so it just kind of is what it is. Everybody kind of ages out of their job eventually, right?
T-Bob, you know who had
52 years old. I said 58. I apologize. 52.
Yeah. Looks great for 52, too.
He does.
You know who had more pre-snap movement than any team in college football?
Michigan?
The Michigan Wolverines.
I mean, go look at that Alabama game plan.
So
it was a masterclass of creating weaknesses by attacking and confusing the flanks.
So even a team that old school in nature, certainly in college, 12 personnel, 21 personnel, 22, they still realize that you have to do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try to create advantages. It's indicators, certainly, in coverage, but also create advantages in the run game. The Saints struggled to run the football this year. Movement can give you an angle to be able to be a better run blocker. And when you have an offensive line that's struggling like it is, when you have some tight ends that are struggling, Juwan Johnson, he's never going to be a guy that's known for his blocking, right? Jimmy Graham and different tight ends that you have, they're more Fs than Ys. Well, you have to create them an advantage, put them on the move, give them an angle, and we didn't see those things.
Well, and Eric McCoy even talked about it, right? Because, the offensive line got better because they found some guys, but also the offensive line got better because they were put in better positions to succeed, as was the rest of the offense, right? That's why everything got better. So whoever you go next, we can have that conversation next about maybe some potential names. Whoever you do go, though, has some pretty nice weapons to work with, man. With Olave, Raheem Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, maybe Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller with the small flash at the end of the year. Like, you got some pieces. Can you maximize them? Can you bring this Saints offense into the new age? We'll see. But again, understand why Pete had to go. I think it's the right move. It makes sense. I do wonder who you'll be able to attract when Dennis Allen kind of has that stench of death around him. But again, just don't lose complete sight of all the good that Pete Carmichael gave this franchise over the 18 years, because he deserves to be celebrated and deserves to be thanked for that, no matter how ignominious the end may have been. Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.